or I'll wait for it. Great. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Today is Sunday, July 6th, and we thank you for taking time out of your holiday weekend to join us. I'm sorry, I'm going to let some more people in the waiting room who are waiting. To join us, the Lady Liberty League. And I'm Suda Richko, one of the co-founders, along with Tom Early and with Laura Hudak, who is on a camping trip today. But we are the Lady Liberty League, and we believe strongly in having a forum where we provide verified sources of information on current issues that matter most to people today. In addition to that, quality speakers with the expertise that they bring from their field. Some ground rules, just keep your microphones all on mute so it does not interrupt. And if you have questions along the way, please, we encourage you to put them in the chat. And Tom, our moderator, will certainly be happy to filter them out and ask them after our speaker presents. So for today, we are excited to have Michelle Mazur. Michelle brings nearly 6 years of experience at the front lines of library service, where her role as a branch services clerk has made her a trusted connector between the community and the critical resources that libraries provide, from passport and voter registration services to facilitating book clubs and helping patrons navigate the world of public information. Michelle wears many hats, and she wears them with care. She wears them with knowledge, and she wears them with what I have come to discover, a beautiful, quiet determination. She is a graduate of Baldwin Wallace University with a Bachelor's of Art in English and Creative Writing. Michelle's educational background fuels her commitment to the written word and the power it holds to shape lives and societies. Her breadth of knowledge spans the full spectrum of library services, and her passion runs deep. She believes passionately in the power of reading, the necessity of equal access to diverse materials, and the role libraries play in helping individuals reach their fullest potential. Her talk today, The Black Hole, What We Lose When We Lose Libraries, will explore what vanishes from a community, often silently, when libraries are diminished or defunded. With a warm, thoughtful presence and a fierce devotion to justice, education, and democracy, Michelle reminds us that defending our libraries is defending the heart of our civic life. So, with that, I would love to introduce Michelle Mazur.
Hi, thank you, Sue. That was so sweet.
Sure.
And thank you guys for being here on a holiday weekend. I know a lot of people are out of town this weekend, so I appreciate people taking the time to do this. So kind of just jumping right into what's going on with libraries right now. I'm sure everyone's aware of what's been going on, or at least you've heard some about the state budget and how that may affect schools and libraries. And we're concerned because all of this, this trickles down and there's different levels. So at the federal level, obviously at the top is where this is coming from, but it's trickling down and affecting the state. It's going to affect our budget. It's going to affect our programming to a degree, and that's different for different systems as well. So kind of just a general overview. First of all, as far as Project 2025's agenda, because that is where all of this originates, there's different ways that they're using to attack libraries right now, and there's terminology that they are using. And just as a couple of examples, almost anything that this administration disagrees with or doesn't want you to see or wants to be censored or removed, they're going to probably label it either obscene or pornographic in some way. It's probably not. But that is a term that they like to throw out there because why? That scares people. And if you're a parent and you're somebody saying librarians are handing out pornographic material and you're not aware of what that they're actually referring to and what's going on, that's encouraging people to sort of demonize libraries, demonize librarians, and the people who are, handing out this material. So I will say there are some things that I've kind of been surprised have been labeled in this category. So if you wanted some examples, almost anything that Judy Blume has written, which a lot of us grew up reading those books.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen everything from Charlotte's Web, and that was not labeled pornographic, but that was talking animals, and someone was against that. They said nobody should have this. So they're throwing out these words, they're trying to scare people. And that's the biggest thing we need to fight back on is, first of all,
Mhm.
obviously no one's throwing pornographic materials at your children. And that's the biggest thing they're using to demonize librarians. And there are actually states now, and I think, Sue, you've mentioned this in our conversations earlier too. There have been states that have tried to pass laws that would actually criminalize librarians and label them as sex offenders because of material that these people deem inappropriate as being set out where they think children shouldn't have it. And when I'm talking about some of these materials, there was someone in the State House just recently who tried to issue something as part of the budget to get restricted materials. And his reasoning was he saw materials in the children's area that were basically referencing what we would consider maybe trans issues, LGBTQ plus families. And they're just talking about here's a kid who has two moms, here's a kid with two dads. He considers that against his religion. So he's going to throw that out there and say, this is pornography. Don't put this out here. And that opens a door for librarians to be charged and criminalized for having that. It's just inclusive material, it's nothing bad. So we're trying to get more attention on this because as this is coming down from there, and it's leading into these parental rights, and I'm using quotes here, as far as what people don't want their kids to read. And a lot of that is we don't want our kids to read this because it goes against our beliefs, and that's okay. You're allowed to have your beliefs. You're allowed to restrict what your personal kids read. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. But the library can't be their parents. So for our job is to conclude all of the inclusive material because we live in huge diverse communities here. Everyone should feel welcome. Everyone should feel included. Our job is to make sure that that happens. The parent's job, if you so choose, if you want to restrict what your kid is reading, you're free to do that. We can't police that. Um, there is, and I can go into this further a little bit later on too. There's a library bill of rights. It's if you go to the American Library Association's website, you can find it there, and it'll break down all of them. But one of the main ones is access for everybody. And most libraries will follow this Bill of Rights as far as their programming. So that means we have to provide diverse materials, we have to be inclusive, and we can't tell you what you can and cannot check out of the library. And that doesn't matter your age. We can't tell somebody to come up and say, you can't have this from the library because, this is restricted. So that is not our job to police that. Um, what's happening as a result of all this going on is this is trickling down to the states. And now, just recently in our last budget bill, there was a line item veto that was added, or a line item that was added to this budget. And I'm still trying to figure out how this connects to a budget specifically, unless they're trying to pull funding to restrict materials in Ohio libraries and say, okay, anything that we think falls under the category of, and most of it had to do with gender expression and sexual orientation and things of that nature, has to be pulled and be restricted. Well, the problem with that is that language is so vague, for starters, that I don't know if you saw, there was actually a story on the news for a librarian in Cuyahoga Falls. She went ahead and said, okay, if this is the rule, here's what we would have to pull. They had to pull things like Little Women or a series about a character named Dog Man because it had woman and man in the title. We would have to audit so many individual books to even decide if something falls into that category and how. The resources aren't even there to even provide for that right now, let alone deciding where we would put that. And what you run into with this too is that you're stigmatizing certain groups of the population, and that's the biggest problem. If we have a child that comes into the library and he has two moms, or if we have a child who comes in the library, or anyone that comes in the library and is LGBTQ plus themselves, and you've taken material that represents them and you've thrown it into a section that's adults only, what are you telling these kids? Something's wrong with me, something's wrong with my family. Why is this restricted and people can't see it? So it's just another way of excluding a minority or a different part of the population that you're trying to go against. So that particular line item was vetoed by the governor, which is good, but it can be overridden. I'm gonna go on a limb and say it's probably not gonna happen anytime soon. They're not even in session right now. So they need a 3/5 majority of each chamber to override that veto. And they have until December of 2026 to do that, is my understanding. So unless something drastic happens over the summer that pulls them back into session, I don't foresee that happening now, but it's out there. It's floating around out there and it's not 100% not gonna happen. But we're grateful the governor did veto that. Um, so these are just some of the things that we're fighting against right now. And in terms of pulling funding too, because we used to be, Ohio was actually one of the best funded library systems in the country. We have an amazing library system in Ohio. We can share books among different systems. You can go anywhere in this state. You can get a library card for free if you're a resident of Ohio. It doesn't matter what library system. That's not true in every state. There are states where if you go into a system that's not yours, you have to pay for a library card or pay for extra services and programs. We don't have that in Ohio because of the funding that we have. I can have somebody come in who lives in Columbus or Cincinnati and they want to get a card in Cuyahoga County. That's fine. You live in Ohio, it's free. Here's a card. So just having that access for everyone in the state is huge. So this funding that we had, it's going to affect different states or different districts differently. We're a pretty big district. We do get other funding from property taxes, for example, grants, other things. So it may not hit a large system as hard, but the rural systems in particular are going to get hit harder by this cut in funding because they don't have the resources to be able to go out and raise property taxes. First of all, who can afford property taxes in general right now? Everyone's struggling with that. So you cut their funding and they rely on such a larger portion of the state funding that that's really going to hurt them as well. So, and now we are sharing that funding with other state agencies as well. So that's an even bigger cut that's coming out of the general public library funds that we may stand to lose. So that's just kind of some of the background on the budgeting that's going on and some of the censorship that they're trying to impose. And I'm grateful that, it hasn't reached drastic levels here yet, but it's just about control and restricting information and restricting inclusion in the libraries. And if I could say one more thing about the restrictions on books, and this applies to any category, but you're cutting back on people's ability to access books. Books teach empathy in particular. I know growing up, I can speak for myself. My family didn't have a lot of money. We didn't travel. We didn't really get too far out of our little bubble where I grew up in. But you know what? You can go to the library. You can get out books about other countries. You can get out books about other people. You can read about people that you might not encounter in your own life and traditions that you might encounter in cultures. It gives you that window into their life. And if we lose that ability to empathize with one another and connect with one another and with people who are different from us, that to me is the biggest loss. Because now you're isolating people, and by isolating people, you're making it easier to manipulate them into going down these roads with false information. And it's just an easier way to control people if they don't know what's out there. And it creates more fear and more separateness between us. And right now, what we need is to be coming together if we're going to fight back against these things. So And then just in terms of things that the library provides as well, besides books, obviously, is the big one, but we connect people with so many different services. We have social workers that can connect you with programs if you need anything, if you're unhoused, if you're food insecure, if maybe you're just stuck in a rough time and you need some help to pull you out. We have job services, and that's been huge too. We've had people come in that they get help with their resumes. Maybe they need help. They need a room where they can do a Zoom meeting. They need a place to have an interview. We can provide all of that. So we're giving people a leg up and we're helping them be better, more productive members of the community and grow in their own lives. And all of this is free, guys. Like you can just walk into the library and ask for help and it's free. You can't find that anywhere else. And these are things that are connecting communities together. So if we lose, the more funding we lose and the more people start fighting back and trying to divide us, those are some of the things that we stand to lose. And that's going to hurt the whole community in the long run.
I like, Michelle, how you bring up that phrase that books or other media in libraries creates empathy. And we talked about this, you and I, a little bit yesterday, and we talked about, the fact that you are happy that your library hasn't been forced to ban any books. But you did say something interesting yesterday, and maybe you can elaborate on it today, that these same books that they would otherwise have banned, Charlotte's Web. We talked about To Kill a Mockingbird and some of those story lines and themes, that these stories create not only empathy, but they open up discussions between people who otherwise wouldn't even have those questions or comments in their mind because it's not their lived life experience further creating that connection. But in the absence of these books, it creates a wider divide. Would you like to talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, and that's another thing with people saying, I don't want my kids to read something about people that are different or people that are, hard topics. And To Kill a Mockingbird is a good example of that. Another book that I've on the ban list frequently, Diary of Anne Frank. We can't talk to our kids about stuff like this. You need to talk to your kids about stuff like this. Because first of all, if we don't study what happened in the past, how are we going to know to prevent it going into the future? And that does provide that connection. But if there's something that you're concerned about your kids reading, and they want to read these books, let them read it and let them bring it to you and discuss it with you. It opens up dialogue about these kinds of topics and let the book kind of guide you into the subject. I mean, to just block it at some point, your child's going to go out into the world. They're going to encounter these things anyways. Your kid's going to go out and they're going to encounter topics like racism or, repression. They're going to encounter cultures that are different from theirs. These can be a way to prepare them how to learn about that and how to deal with it if you sit down and have a discussion with them, as opposed to just them going out there and not knowing how to handle it or being afraid of other people and other cultures. There's no reason to be creating more fear and divisiveness. Because if the more you know a person in person, if I sit down and have a conversation with a person and I'm looking them in the eye, that's a human being. And that's one thing that these books can create is you're reading about the lived experiences of other human beings connects you to those people and you realize that's not something you need to be afraid of, or if you have something that you want to learn about, you can just sit down and talk to people. And it worries me with social media a lot too. We're all sitting on these, scrolling through our phones. I do it too, but we're all sitting here scrolling through phones looking at these posts, and it's really easy to get on a social media post and write something mean and ugly or get into an argument because you're not looking someone in the face. You don't know them personally. It's a wall that's they've put up between us, and these books are a way of kind of tearing that down. Book clubs are a way of tearing that down. we read a book. We all sit down and we discuss what we read. You know what? That's how you build connections between people. So that's something else you can do with, use the books to open up a dialogue and just talk to each other. People don't do that very often anymore, unfortunately. So
I love that, and getting to have a full appreciation of a live life experience outside of yourself and to build that bridge and to connect. And I like how you say to meet each other face to face and in the presence of each other. It is different than either attacking from the keyboard or being the recipient of an attack from the keyboard. When we talked about it yesterday, you also brought up, and I don't know if you want to touch on it or just throw it out there as a suggestion, a book that you recommend called Cast by Isabella Wilkerson. And if you want to touch a little bit on that.
that, as an example of a book that has been banned in several places too. Our library, just for the record, we are not banning anything in our library that is out there. You can go get it. Um, but it's as an example because it teaches about a perspective of history and a perspective of slavery specifically. She was comparing slavery to a caste system in India or also, Nazi Germany. So you had these comparisons to certain groups of people that are othered, that are repressed, that are kept separate or kept down for certain reasons, and creates a common enemy, which is what allows these authoritarian regimes to stay in power because everybody lets turn against this one common enemy for whatever reason. And by pulling these types of things and pulling books about slavery or any type of history in the US that isn't specifically, kind of a whitewash history that they're trying to promote out there, our history is not perfect. Of course, it's not, no country has a perfect history. But by pulling these things and not teaching people about it and sweeping it under the rug is just another form of control because you can't fight back against things that you don't even know are going on or understand. So, I mean, I don't want to take it as far too far, but if you wanted a comparison, so okay, you look at other countries like Tiananmen Square, whatever happened at Tiananmen Square, and there was an uprising at one point in China, and the government came out, they repressed it. It's kind of been erased from history. It's been erased from people's memories. You're not going to probably find anything about it over there. And that's how they start controlling the narrative. Like they're erasing what happened in the past. They're keeping you from accessing that information so you don't fight back. Because again, if you don't know and you're not educated on something, you're not going to know to fight back against it. So that was just an example too of like a really great book that I do recommend. But that is also the type of thing that's being pulled from shelves in some places because they don't want you to know and they don't want you to dwell on the darker parts of our history.
Michelle, I wanted to go back to your incredibly empathetic approach to exposing people to things they might not usually see. And I wanted to kind of challenge you into the reason why we're at this place is because parents are concerned about their children developing in ways that they want to do it. And I think they have two opposing views. One, they want to control what it is in that public space and you want to have it open to expose it for everyone. Do you think there is a way we can bring those together and recognize that children develop at different paces, that parents also want a worldview because they all expose their own morals and values to the children? How can we come together without oppressing the history that we know we need to learn from?
That's a good question too. I think to a degree, obviously, we're not going to just say, okay, we're going to pull a book because you don't like it. But if you have questions about something or you want to interact about something, we can facilitate discussions about things. And also, if you as a parent, we kind of need you to be aware of what your kids are doing as well. So while we may not say, okay, I can't check this book out to your kid, and you're free to come in, obviously, and do that. But I think what we're running into in this country in general too, and it's happening and in public education, it's happening everywhere. But we're running into a situation where my beliefs are the only ones that need to be imposed. My beliefs are the only ones that matter. And that's where we need to take a step back because this is a democracy. Everybody's beliefs are going to be different. Everybody's beliefs matter. And we're losing that because there is a group of very loud, very vocal people who want to speak up and say, no, we're going to take this away from everybody. You can educate yourself. If there's a book that you're concerned with, read it. Pick it up, read it. Find out what's in it that's bothering you. Or is it just that people told you to be afraid of it? Don't take anybody's word. Read the book, see what's in it. And if you still have questions, at least that opens the door for you to learn. And you're going into like intellectual freedom in this country, First Amendment rights, but everyone's free to have their own ideas about things. Everyone's free to raise their children according to their own ideas. This goes two directions because, first of all, using these, say a book about an LGBTQ family for an example, but yes, it's important for those children to see themselves in those books, but it's also important for other people who aren't in those situations to read those books so that when you run into somebody who is a child of LGBTQ parents, say, or somebody who relates to that, now you have a connection to that. So I think, we can't just, while we can't separate things ourselves, and there are certain, if there's certain subject matter that you're looking for, obviously there are people that can help you find that. But as far as just restricting things based on one or two people's opinions, that's where we're running into a wall because we're running into people who are like, my beliefs are the only ones that should be out there. So that it's tough. It's not easy. There's
And,
no simple answer to how to do that. But
and just to follow up on Tom's question, in previous conversations, you had brought up to me that the library has a policy, and it's the Latin term in loco parentis, right? And so you do have a layer of protection or boundary around what the librarian can or should do in the situation of that unreasonable expectation that we're policing or monitoring other people's children and their choices and their consumption. Do you find that that is something that is strong enough in your experience when parents are expecting something unreasonable from you or your coworkers?
I think it depends on the parent. There's going to be people that will complain, why did you let my kid take this book out of the library? And that is there to protect us to a degree too. Again, it goes back to, we can't parent your child. And there are privacy laws and I would need to look further how that extends to children, but they do extend to most everybody as far as what you're allowed to take out. We can't reveal that information about anybody because it's private information, what they're checking out from the library. So to a degree, yeah, that does kind of give us the protection of not being responsible for monitoring everything your kid's doing. And there are limitations as far as I can speak at least directly to our policies, but if you sign your child up for a library card, and they are a minor, there is things you can limit, such as access to the internet. We can control that because you have to sign into the internet with your card number. So if you want your child's internet access restricted, we can do that. So we're not just saying it's a free for all, let your kid come in and surf the web and look up anything they want. You can restrict. There are certain things that we are able to do. But to restrict books in particular, if you say, I don't want a book about such and such topic, that's too wide of a thing for us to be able to control. So that's where that comes in to say, okay, you need to be specific with your child, what they're allowed to do.
I know you mentioned earlier that when parents are concerned with a book that you suggest, go read it, go find out. perhaps sometimes there's a lot of books out there and people are looking for a central source, maybe an unbiased source of what is in a book and if it's appropriate for my child. I think of TV and movie ratings to know where it is and be like, oh, is this appropriate for my kid? Are there similar book rating and summary services that you know of that a parent or concerned person can look at to know what it is that they might be consuming?
That is actually a fantastic idea to have. And there are, to a degree, I mean, if you go into a children's section of a library, they are kind of organized in an age appropriate, like these are appropriate for this level or this grade or this age. So, and that's more reading experience, I think, probably, but content as well. I mean, they're not going to throw something from, you know, the adult romance section into the kids department on purpose anyway. But um, yeah, as far as I'm aware, I don't know that there's any kind of a specific rating system like you mentioned that correlates to something like a TV or, movie rating system, something like that. It might be hard to implement that only because different kids mature at different ages. So what's appropriate for one kid who's 12, 13 years old might not be appropriate for another. So it's something that might be a little bit complicated to do, but as far as organizing summaries, you can go online, even on our website and look up books as far as and get a summary of what that book's about. So you do have the option to do that research. But yeah, as far as a specific system, I don't know of any off the top of my head.
I didn't know of one either, but I like where the potential of where it could be. However, I'm leading to you're the expert at the moment. You, the librarians, are the ones that maybe should be helping guide parents or anyone that's concerned what is appropriate for their kid. Have that discussion. I love the open forum idea. I do think that's really how ideas get exchanged. Is there an advocacy group to help support yourself, other librarians, in this difficult conversation that we're having with where funding goes?
Yeah, I mean, and as to your point about, the librarians guiding people in what's appropriate, absolutely they can do that. If you librarians are kind of magicians in that kind of a department. You can go up to them and say, this is what I'm looking for. This is, what I don't want. And I've seen them work miracles and really have all kinds of options. So yeah, there are, but children's librarians in particular are very good at, if you have a concern and something you don't want them to have, just go tell the librarian what you're looking for. They will help you find something appropriate. Um, as far as specific advocacy groups right now, we are kind of our own advocacy group. We support each other in all of this. Public school teachers, public school librarians, public librarians. We're all kind of in this together. So, and I've had a lot of support from the community too, which has been huge. We all have, as these budget things are going on, the library has put out, emails to customers or statements to customers. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's who you can advocate to. Here's how to advocate. And people have really jumped in. We've had people coming and asking us, what's going on with the budget? Are you guys losing funding? Are they making you guys ban books? We have some very passionate customers, and that's amazing because that kind of gives me hope that we will pull through this and sustain, but it's going to be an uphill battle right now.
Switching gears just a little bit, you had brought up a concept that was absolutely foreign to me. At least I've never heard about it in this capacity. But you brought up First Amendment audits, and then you also touched on the library's protection around those First Amendment audits through limited public forum and through your code of conduct. Could you explain to anyone who's listening what these First Amendment audits are and some of that stress that it may create in that library space that should be a safe space?
Right. And that's the key. A library is a safe space. We welcome everybody at all walks of life. Everybody's free to come and spend time as a third space as well. You're free to hang out there all day if you want. We're not going to throw you out. what that was, and I've seen it tapering down a little, which is good. But there's been at one point, there were people who were coming into the library just filming people just to get a reaction. They might come in with their cell phone and point it at people and just be walking around filming. And then when confronted about that or what they were doing or asked questions, they would come back and say, it's my First Amendment right because this is a public building. I pay taxes. I'm allowed to come in here and film people. That's a slippery slope because there are places where you can publicly go out and film and that's okay. But the library is not one of those places. So what we were trying to explain to people, there is such a thing as a limited public forum, which is what our libraries kind of fall under, which means, yes, it is a public space, but we have the ability to create our own code of conduct. And a lot of that is because of privacy. We might have people in the library in all kinds of different situations. They don't want to be filmed and they have a right not to be filmed. And then as far as protecting what they're even doing in the library, and that goes back to even protecting what material they're checking out. You're going around filming that, you're invading that privacy as well. So we're able to put that in our code of conduct that you can't just randomly go around filming people. And their whole point in this, and a lot of times it's teenagers that will come in and do this, their only thing is to get a rise out of people and try to say, hey, look, the library is squashing my First Amendment rights, which is a little bit ironic too, when you're considering that a lot of these are the same people that are coming in saying, you need to censor all these books, which is a direct violation of your First Amendment rights. So they they would come in and try to get a rise out of people basically, and then put it on the internet and use that as a weapon against libraries in general, First Amendment speech and specifically. Um, I have, fortunately, it seems that we haven't really encountered that as much lately, but that was something that they were doing to just kind of discredit libraries or try to start arguments within libraries about their rights being taken away. So kind of villainize us once again for for taking away rights. But yeah, fortunately that's hopefully not as common, but it does happen.
You've mentioned, I think a couple times now, how libraries serve not only as a place for literature to people to look at, but places to create their resumes, hold meetings, community centers. What other ways would you emphasize how libraries serve as a free third space for people to be in the community, and why we should continue supporting this outside of just the knowledge and information that is in there?
Third space is one of my favorite things because everybody needs a space, right? There are times you need to not be in your house, and that can be for any reason. Maybe nothing's going on. Maybe you don't have a place to go. We have unhoused people that spend time in the library during the day because they need a place to come in. It's cool. We have air conditioning. You're free to stay there. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to spend money. It's just an open place that you can go. Parks and libraries are some of the last places left that we have in our community where you can just go and be and not be required to spend money or do anything to stay there. So that's been huge in terms of, and not just unhoused people. Sometimes people need a room to use for interviews, meetings. There was a lady who came in just this past week, looking for help from social services, looking for help for a resume. We helped her print out a resume. We helped her download Teams so she could do her interview because she didn't have that on her phone, didn't know how to do it. She came back at the end of the week and said, hey, I got the job. I wanted to come in and thank you for being here and for doing this. Um, we have people in terms of using a third space as well. They live nearby, don't have air conditioning in their apartment. It's 96 degrees outside. Come in the library, sit down, cool off. Those kind of spaces don't really exist that much anymore. There's not a lot of places you can go and just be and not have to be pressured to do anything and just be safe. We're going to protect you. We're going to protect your privacy. So if you're coming into the library because maybe there's a kid who's being bullied, the library is a safe place that they can come and they can stay and they can come to us if they need something. They just want to come in and sit and get away from the fray. It's a space to do that. So there's not a lot of places that let you do that. And it is important because it makes people feel safe. They need to have that sense of safety.
Thanks for sharing that. I realized I introduced a term of third space, and that might not be known by many people or everyone on this call, but a third space is a communal space where you're not expected to spend money. You can go, that's not work or home, usually a community space. And I think the library absolutely sums up what that space can be. In a lot of other cultures, we have plazas and squares that people meet in, they hold their farmers markets in. We don't really have that because of the space in which the United States was developed, but communities have served, or libraries have served that purpose here as cities have grown in the United States. So thanks for working with me through that. I realized I introduced a new term. I threw a link in the chat just in case anyone wants to learn more. But anyway.
No, I'm glad because third spaces was actually something I wanted to bring up as well. So I'm glad you did that.
And I love, Tom, that you brought up third spaces as well. I also want to give a little more buy-in or ownership. It's not a free space. It's a space that we have bought and paid into as a community, actively or inactively through our tax dollars. So to provide the protection and sanctuary around that third space should be something that all of us fiercely protect. Um, which leads me into one of my last questions for you, Michelle, is in moments of political repression, libraries, they've historically been sites of resistance and refuge. What gives you hope now, and what can we learn from past generations who defended intellectual freedom under fire? And what is your source of greatest hope when it comes to that?
Everyone on this Zoom call, everyone who's having this discussion right now, and I'm going to be honest, like the more resistance against libraries that we've seen every single time our system has had to put out an email or a call to action to our customers like, hey, we need your help. We need you to contact your representatives. People have shown up in huge volumes. It's been amazing support system. So I kind of feel like in a way, I'm not sure the state government, when they started this whole budget and when they started pushing back against libraries, realized the beast that they were going to awaken. Maybe they underestimated how much people utilize libraries and will staunchly defend them. And in terms of information in general, they want to squash your intellectual freedom. They want to pull information out of your hands because what's their biggest fear? An informed electorate, because you can't manipulate them. So we want to put that information in your hands. If you need information on a candidate or how to register to vote, or we have representatives that use our libraries to have meetings with their constituents so that you can voice your opinion. All of that, and people tend to overlook too, just a little bit off a tangent, but local and state government right now is kind of a big deal. People tend to just jump to like, I vote in presidential elections or congressional, the big names, people that you hear about all the time. This has to start local because you have to build the smaller communities first and develop those connections. And then those are the places that we start and where we start building so we can build a better country as a whole. So for us, we're connecting people in the community with each other. We're providing whatever information you need to make informed decisions when you're voting. We're providing a place for you to vote in some cases. Um, so that's one of the biggest ways I think we fight back against this sort of authoritarian push that we're seeing in this country right now is we're providers of information that maybe they don't want you to have because the less you know, the more they can sort of manipulate your thoughts and what information you're seeing. And we've seen that in the media. We see it in the schools with what they're not wanting to teach. So, it's kind of hitting everywhere all at once because that's what they want to do is bombard you with so much stuff that you freeze up. Don't freeze up. Just take a breath, come in, talk to us, go and get what information you need. The librarians will help you find it. But the the unity of the people that have been fighting back for us is so just really amazing. I've seen them at protests. I've seen them, coming into the library questioning us about things. So we're grateful for that. And if you want to contact your representatives and you don't know who they are, we can help you with that too. So
I love that our greatest opportunity for advocacy is still coming to the libraries so you can help support them. It's a great resource. I wanted to go into some questions that we received in the chat here. Two of them, both around funding. Do you have more information about the library funding that was impacted? Is it funding that was impacted, or was it just a restriction on the types of books that are available or in that way? And then also, do you have other ideas on increasing funding for the libraries? Because you did mention how property tax is the primary funder for it. Is there other ways to increase or separate funding to maybe alleviate some of those pains that people have?
So in terms of the budget, there were actually two separate items. So the line about the censorship and the library restrictions that the governor did veto, that was one separate item that had been added into the budget bill, that he was able to veto. In terms of our budget, that used to be a percentage of the state revenue. It was a flat, I think it was 1.7% of the state budget was the number. And that was a pretty reliable, stable source. What they've done is they've taken that and put it into a line item, which is not so stable because they can re-vote on that at any time. When they do the budget, it can change. It's not as stable. And it did reduce the number a little bit. It also has reduced, because we are now sharing that with other state agencies, that reduces a little bit of what we're getting as a whole that we would have gotten the whole portion of before. So in terms of making it a line item, it just makes it less steady, less stable, less predictable. So especially for the smaller libraries that rely more on state funding, that makes it hard for them to plan too far into the future because now this is more volatile. It can change more frequently. So it makes it hard for them to plan ahead. In terms of where we can get more funding, at Cuyahoga County in particular, because we are such a huge system, we're able to run levies. Fortunately, we have so many people that support the libraries. They've been helpful in voting these levies through. We can collect property taxes. The smaller ones are the ones I'd be most concerned about that maybe don't have the population, or the population can't afford to keep raising their property taxes. And I don't know I don't have an easy solution for that, unfortunately, where that funding can come from. And that's something we can, hopefully we won't have to dig into in the future, but we probably will. So yeah, for right now, I have seen, and I'm just pulling up in my head, there was an article, this was not in our state, but there was a smaller rural library in another state that was facing funding cuts because of censorship issues. And their community actually came together and rallied around, I don't know if it might have even been a public funding. Somebody started a GoFundMe or something, which was insane, but they just rallied and were like, we're not going to let this happen. So to do that for a humongous library system is not realistic, but it's, in a smaller system that people were pulling together and finding their own ways of sourcing things. So that was something that communities need to come together and talk about.
I think you made a good point earlier. When people come for the libraries, they're really awakening a large beast, right? So you even see it in the smaller communities. They will go to whatever means necessary to save those community spaces, whether it's a GoFundMe or here in Cuyahoga County, we're able to pass levies on a pretty consistent basis. I can't remember, honestly, in my lifetime where a library levy has failed. So I everyone cares deeply about it. There was one other question that was received. It was earlier when we're talking about censorship in the libraries. Do you know more about how that censorship works? You mentioned somebody levies a complaint and then librarians could be held accountable for it. But who is the one that eventually deems it as appropriate or inappropriate? And how does that get sectioned off? How does that impact you in your work?
So it's different in different states. Fortunately, because right now we don't have a strict law about censorship right now, at least in our state. It's not hitting us as hard as maybe some of the smaller areas where they do have these laws. In our system, if people are free to come and, file a complaint against a book, that's okay. You're free to come and talk to us about it. And there are forms that you can fill out to actually contact if you want to take it all the way up, to administration, to the collections, and they will explain the process of, how these books are acquired, and they'll meet with people and have those discussions. So there are ways that you can contact, the people who specifically are in charge of acquiring those books. You can contact them and you can have meetings with them, and they will facilitate or at least listen and have those conversations. So there are ways that you can contact people. And there's actually, I believe there's even a form on our website for that you can go on and fill out if you have questions about a book.
I will look for that and throw it in the chat just in case it's there. One more question for you. What is the single best way we can take action to support libraries?
We need you to stay in touch with your reps. We need you to advocate. We need you to contact the state house, contact your representatives, contact the governor. In this instance, he vetoed that line item. People pushed back. We said, hey, we're not going to stand for this. It does make a difference. And I know that there are times, especially with everything going on right now, you feel like you're walking into a wall. It's like nobody's listening. This isn't going to work. They're going to do what they want anyway. But you know what? Every phone call that you make and every email that you send, it's being recorded. They have to record that. They're hearing it and they're getting all this pushback. Go ahead and flood their inbox. Just, let them know. And I know it feels like it's not making a difference, but there have been cases, like the governor stepping up, no, I'm going to veto this. People do listen. And in the long run, when it comes election time, make sure you know how your representative voted. And if they didn't vote the way you want them to, vote them out. That's your right. This is a democracy still. So, but it pays to pay attention to, and that goes back to paying attention to the local politics as well. Like it pays to pay attention to that because that's what's going to affect you directly, even more so than what's going on at the federal level. That trickles down, but it's going to come through locally. So
They only win if we allow them to keep us in the dark, disorganized, and divided. So 3Ds to remember: dark, disorganized, divided. And if we overcome all of that, we take back our power as the people.
if everybody that has come in and spoken to us and advocated for us links arms and stands together, there's a lot more of us than there are of them. So we do have power.
100%.
I think that was the end of the questions that we had here. I think that could be it for this discussion here today. We're going to post it on YouTube later today, so feel free to share with everyone that you think needs to hear this message. Sue and I are grateful for your time, Michelle. We love libraries. We think they are an incredibly valuable source for everyone. So this is a worthwhile topic to discuss, and knowing how much is being impacted, not only through the state, but the federal levels of censorship and inclusivity. People are trying to control that narrative, like you said. I'm grateful for the opportunity here to have you with us today. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak out then and just keep pushing, guys. Keep controlling the narrative. We got this.
100%. I'm going to mirror everything Tom just said, and we're grateful to you personally, Michelle, for taking your time to come and talk, and to everyone who joined us on the call, to anyone who watches the recorded version of the call afterwards. It is super important to stay aware and to stay informed. And next meeting is going to be July 20th at 1 p.m., same via Zoom. And we are excited to say that we are going to have, for anyone who follows our local news, we are going to have Dr. Lauren Bean and Dr. Valerie Fouts-Faller. They're both the pediatricians from University Hospital who were dismissed for organizing. And their organizing efforts are just a beautiful story. They are not trying to leverage better pay or benefits for themselves. They are trying to claw back the voice that is much needed for the providers when it comes to direct patient care. So I hope that everyone can tune in for our next call on the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.